Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Orange Zeppelin and today is a wonderful day because I am finally getting around to doing a coloring book video. Last time I did a coloring book video, I'm pretty sure, is when I absolutely butchered a Hello Kitty coloring book. This one I'm very excited about because, well, one, I got it at the Dollar Tree, so I got a great deal on it, but two, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! And this was a show I was very fond of in my youth, and I did rewatch the series recently, so this is going to be a wonderful trip down memory lane to do some coloring here. This is the coloring book paper that I've complained about in the past, where little cheap newsprint, not great to color on, which I did complain about before, but this is actually probably the best paper if you're going to be using crayons, which is presumably the material you are using, because if you're coloring in this, you're probably 7 years old, and so you're using crayons, and it's that toothiness of the paper that's going to really help the crayons stick. So let's take a look in here, and you'll notice I got my post-it notes, and the post-its correspond to things that I might be coloring on video, and then we got some activity pages. I don't care about those. I do notice the print quality. Pegasus here is like way different. Just the way the solid black has appeared as not solid black. They've used a wildly different quality image, and you're gonna see that quite a bit. I don't care about that, but this right here, I've got this noted as a material test page because I fully intend to stress test the hell out of this coloring book. We are not going to be limiting ourselves just to crowns. We're going to go pretty hard. I like the composition on this piece, a nice close-up, so I'm thinking this is a possible option. You could do a maze if you want to. I don't want to. Baby Dragon is fun. This is actually, I feel like this one's got good, solid line art, so this would be a good option for coloring. Do a word search. The dot game. This isn't even Yu-Gi-Oh! Related. It's just draw some dots. I don't care. I don't want to count anything. I'm not here to count. Dare you try to make me learn. Celtic Guardian, my boy. I'm probably coloring him in. Dark Magician Girl. I feel like this is one I gotta color in and then put in the thumbnail and then I'll get thousands of views. I think that would be a good strategy. They didn't even finish the arrow. They did not care enough to get a complete arrow here. So I think this is the same ass dude like 3 pages later. It's the same game. They got the dot game. What's going on here? Look. It's not even a particularly good game and they've already reused it. Come on, coloring book people, what are you doing? Another counting. They have the unmitigated audacity to try to encourage me to learn. That's not what we're here for today. This is the same Merrick that was... Oh man, if you want to watch me really have an aneurysm over reused art, you gotta watch my Lara Sue Chronicles video. Half that video is just me having a stroke. See, they got the same ass Merrick picture. They just shrunk him a little bit. Put his name in a different spot. Now, I got a little note here, because I'm going to do something specific with this Dark Magician. Actually, Summon Skull would be pretty sick. That would also be a fun thing to color. And there's probably quite a few of these that are going to end up colored. Not necessarily on video, but in my own time, just for fun. I'm probably going to color in Mai, because she's one of my favorite characters. I always like the femme fatale characters. They're my favorite. Amazoness Chainmaster would be very badass. Actually, speaking of Amazoness Chainmaster, this is my lanyard that I wear to work, and on the back of my name tag, this card's actually gotten really beat up. I should probably not keep it in here. Oh, she's really gotten beat up. But Amazoness Chainmaster is the card that I've been wearing on my lanyard that I'm going to now remove now that I see that this has taken a little bit of a beating. Also the Harpy Ladies, my other favorite ladies in the series. Harpy Ladies would be fun to do a piece of. And then this Yugi, this is something I'm definitely going to color, and I got a little note about something I'm going to do with it. Alright, so I'm back. I have done my swatching. I have thrown just about everything I have at this that would not be completely ridiculous. Maybe there are some things that I was not expecting to work very well, and there's a few things that surprised me. So first of all, I did a couple of pen experiments. The ballpoint pen is the best pen for the job here. A couple of my fine liners. Let me grab one. Couple of these worked pretty well, but I did notice they kind of snagged a bit. Oh, got out of focus there. The Micron 08, that one kind of snagged a bit on the toothiness of this paper, and that came up a little bit when I actually tried some fountain pens. Just out of curiosity, I was expecting this to actually go worse than it did. You can see the TWSBI pen that has a fairly thin nib. That one got feathery. The Lamy actually worked reasonably well. It's just that this paper is gonna just suck up all that extra ink, just go. So now that I've disgusted everybody with that sound effect, let's take a look at everything else. So crowns, obviously. The crowns actually went down pretty darn well. Like I was saying, this, as much as it's not the funnest paper to touch and handle, it is pretty good for crowns for that exact reason. This also, you're gonna see I did oil-based colored pencils and just regular Prismacolors. This is looking like our best material here. Obviously anything dry on this absorbative paper. And then, let's see, I got some oil pastel, blended a couple of colors together, also scratched into it, saw how that was going to work. Blending with your fingers isn't going to be fun because I am not fond of really dry medium on dry, toothy paper. It gives me the prickly wicklies. But you can also blend with a rag. I got plenty of rags on hand. You can blend with a paper towel, and that would be all good. The King Art gel sticks are these suckers right here, and I guess they have some of the properties of a very creamy, gooey, I don't even know how to describe what's going on here. It's kind of like an oil pastel in some ways, but they are water soluble. So what I did is I just did like a big solid block there, used some water to pull it over, and I definitely expected watercolors are not going to be great on this paper, but I did try gouache because that is a little thicker. This one, I manipulated this with some water. This one was mostly no water. And you can see on the back, the water, it did start to bleed through a little bit when I didn't use water. Obviously, that was fine. The Tombow markers, the water-based markers, these ones got a little juicy. The Crayola markers, this is just a bad test, because the few Crayola markers I have, they're getting a little crispy with age. And I did get my my Pokemon markers in, and those are extremely crispy. So don't take that as a good representation of this media on that paper. There's some other felt tip markers that it's kind of hard to see because my boy Pegasus is in the way. You can kind of see they didn't bleed that badly. Sharpies are gonna bleed and they're gonna be stinky, and I don't want to breathe that. If you want to get really high while coloring in your coloring book, then maybe that is the choice for you. And then this, I absolutely was not expecting it to work super well, and that is alcohol marker. And you can see those bled through the most, and they were the only thing that actually bled straight through onto my swatching paper. So obviously this is not the best paper for that job. I did also throw acrylic paint at this. That's actually got gesso on it. I put gesso on this whole section here, and then this is different acrylic paints that I went over with. And then I did try a little bit of watercolor. Not a lot of water, mostly a lot of pigment. There was some India ink. That feels like it's still a tiny bit wet, actually. And then I think that was just a Copic marker. And what I did is I had a strip of washi tape down here, and I just put all of that on top of the washi tape. And it is a little hard to see, but I did find that the washi tape blocking wasn't super great. the paper's gotten a little bit, it took a little bit off of the paper. You can see a little bit's gone from that line. And for the Millennium Puzzle, I actually started with alcohol marker. I went over with colored pencils, and then I used a handful of, I used the white brush pen and then one of these white gel pens for the highlights, and I think that looks pretty cool. Oh, I did also throw a little bit of pencil, and that's a tiny bit hard to see in this light, but just too much pencil, if you go too hard with the pencil, you're just going to run the risk of tearing the paper. I also did a little bit of glittery gel pens, should we require those in any pieces. But now we've got an idea of what will work and what we might have to put a little bit of effort to get to cooperate with us. So with that being said, let's get coloring. So first off, we are going to be coloring in Yami Yugi, and we've got to start this thing off right. We're going to be busting out the crowns. Right off the bat, it surprisingly wasn't going very well, or maybe not surprisingly, because I do have a mix of crowns on hand, but none of them are younger than 10 years old. In fact, some of them are actually 31 years old, and I don't know if crowns go bad, but probably if you lose them in the garage for a while, they're going to get a little funky. Because some of these were actually very difficult to work with. Some actually went on pretty well. The pigment actually went on the paper very well. But at first, pretty much all my skin tones were not a very fun time to use. But once I got to the hair, things actually started to go much better. It was starting to feel fun again, not so much of a struggle. One of the things that I actually like about this paper is the newsprint gives it a tiny bit of a tone. It's not just a straight white. You get a little bit of a, not really brownish, kind of a beige. And so it's kind of like working on toned paper. You'll see towards the end of the process, I go in with a white brush pen on anything that needs to be white, and because of that kind of toned color to the paper, that made the white pop really well, and that actually looked pretty cool. While I'm here on the front page, I do have to ask why they called this a jumbo coloring book. This is a standard coloring book. Jumbo would imply heft, and there is no heft to this. I don't know if there's some kind of board of enforcing standards in coloring books that would define what is a jumbo coloring book, what is a standard coloring book. Yes, I'm fully aware that I'm a grown adult complaining about a coloring book. No, I am not fun at parties. I actually Googled what the difference was between a jumbo coloring book and a regular coloring book, and it just told me to go outside. But anyway, this was actually pretty fun to do, and once I introduced my white brush pen to the party at the end of this piece, it was actually starting to look really cool. At this point, I was pretty excited to see how the future illustrations were going to turn out. I also added some black pen in just to emphasize the outlines a little more. You guys probably noticed I used some black pen in Yami's hair a little earlier in the video. Alright, this is definitely looking cool. We are off to a good start. Now, one thing that I discovered very quickly is that I'm going to need to use a protective sheet of paper behind everything I'm working on, regardless of what material I'm using, regardless of whether it bleeds or not, because pressing hard on the paper will actually leave a print of the ink onto the next page. And you could always pull these pages out and tape them onto your work surface also, and you can do that with drafting tape or washi tape to prevent anything from buckling. But I think I'm just going to make do with the protective paper. For this next piece, I'm going to be coloring in Yugi. And remember how I said earlier that markers weren't going to be the best choice? I chose to ignore that piece of knowledge, and that'll quickly become the theme of this video, is me completely ignoring anything that I learned in all of that swatching I did. I'm going to be coloring a little bit lightly. I usually like to do really smooth blending with lots of different marker colors, but I feel like if I do that, this paper is just going to turn into oatmeal. Also, with this style of liner, it's going to look better to do a less detailed coloring style. The paper is very toothy, so with these markers, it's a little bit of an odd texture to work on. And I suspect it's sucking up some extra ink. And with that in mind, I'm not going to use markers for any large areas in future pieces. In general, you probably want to use paint for larger areas instead of using up all your marker ink on big spaces. You also want to take into consideration that some markers have more flow than others. Right now, I'm using mostly Ohuhu markers, and they're pretty juicy. And you'll see kind of later in the video, there were some issues I had with that coloring in really small spaces. There was a little bit of bleeding over the lines. But that's okay, the coloring police haven't come for me yet. Honestly, after my rant earlier about the standards of jumbo versus regular, maybe I'm the coloring book police. This ended up being a surprisingly successful page, despite using a medium that wasn't going to be great on this paper. This might actually be my most favorite of the batch. There was another piece that I made that came very close second that I've actually decided to move into part 2 of this series, because I felt like this video would end up running kind of long. And I did try to edit my videos into comfortable watch times. I tend to like videos that are about half an hour long because I can just throw them on while working on other projects. I don't really care for shorts very much. It may seem counterintuitive, but I always say I don't have time to watch a video that's only 10 seconds. But it's really that 10 seconds takes my whole attention, and I gotta switch to another video, so half an hour video, you put that on, get some stuff done. On the other side of the spectrum, I'm only going to watch a video that's over an hour if it's somebody that I already know and somebody that I enjoy and I'm actually going to want to listen to for an hour. That being said, if you dig around deep enough into my channel, you're going to find a 3-hour long painting video. So if you're really bored, you can throw that on. The paper color is once again making for some interesting effects. It's making all the colors kind of on the warmer side, and in this piece especially, you can see how well the white brush pen works on the whites of the eyes. For this background, I used one of those gel sticks and manipulated it with a little bit of water, and I am super happy with how this one turned out. Alright, this is what everyone is here for. You clicked the video because you saw Dark Magician Girl in the thumbnail. Don't you lie to me. I did discover that the Dark Magician on the facing page has also been repeated later in this book, but that's actually a good thing for me because I've got a plan for him in a future part. This is going to be a several-part series. It's actually very strange to me that so many images and activities just got repeated throughout the book when there's so many other characters in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series that they could have put in. There's characters like Bones and Mako Tsunami who are name-dropped in the word search, but they're not anywhere else in the book. Yugi's grandpa would be fun to color. I love drawing old people. There could stand to be a good headshot of Pegasus instead of the super crispy one we see in a maze page. Actually, why not Exodia? Exodia is on the cover. Maybe that exceeded their budget for how many images they could get the rights to use. I do need to stop complaining. I spent $1.25 on this. 7-year-old me once found that much money in change on the back of a toilet at school. Granted, I didn't save it for a coloring book. I'm pretty sure I bought a cookie from the cafeteria with some milk. Back in my day, you could stretch toilet money pretty far. What were we talking about again? That's right, Dark Magician Girl. With coloring this, I did markers again, but in a way flatter style. This one is more like cell shading. I have 2 tones at most, pretty lightly blended. In the next parts of this video series, I'm probably going to use a lot more pencils and crayons, because I've been doing a lot of markers this time around. and I don't really want to use them up on this particular paper. I think the only art supply I did not test on my swatching page was oil paint, because I'm not using oil paint in a coloring book. I think that might actually really suck. I have tried to oil paint on, it was kind of a watercolor-like paper, and the paper just sucked up all my paint thinner, and it was a super difficult process. I can only imagine what a hot mess it would be trying to use it on this paper. That being said, comment down below if you want to try to see me oil paint something in here. I'm going to assume you hate me, but I'll do it if enough people want me to try. In that instance, it might be a good idea to just take the page out entirely and maybe mount it on some board. Because once your paint thinner's soaked into this paper, I think the entire coloring book now becomes very, very flammable. So the markers were turning out really nice in this piece. Things were going very splendid. That is until I got to the background, and I really should have done the same thing as the last piece, but I wanted to try and cover up the black ring, and that's where things kind of fell apart. Ended up doing a lot of layering, and layering, and layering, and the result was akin to an explosion at the cotton candy factory. And I'm gonna be real with you guys, I kind of hate how the background turned out on this piece. I actually tried to cut into the pigment at some point with a palette knife to maybe create an interesting texture and salvage it all. I ended up ripping the paper in one spot. I actually went in and I was about to say fixed, but I think that's a generous term. I went in and redid some things about a week later because I was just not liking it. And I did that off camera, so you'll see a big change between the end of the working footage and the footage of the finished piece. But this is a good example of how you can absolutely overwork something. This was kind of like trying to fix a gunshot with leeches. Now, it is still absolutely an option to try to cut her out from the rest of the page and just slap her on different paper. I might actually do that off camera. That might be an experiment. But this is a day for experimentation, and sometimes your experiments just aren't going to turn out super well. Okay, let's finish off strong with my man, my dude, Celtic Guardian. This is like Link after hitting the gym. He's been taking his creatine, he's been drinking protein shakes. So you see that washi tape? Now, I know I said earlier in the video, I told you this was going to be a theme. The washi tape wasn't great on this paper. But I did also say that markers and anything water-based wasn't going to be good on this paper, and that's almost exclusively what I've used in this video. So, clearly nothing terrible could ever possibly go wrong as a result of this artistic choice. This is foreshadowing, by the way. You can kind of see that the tape has been cut out around certain elements that overlap the tape, or overlap the border that is, such as the sword, the cape, and the boots. I did cut in too deep in some spots, but that doesn't end up being the main issue. That's also foreshadowing. But this is something that I like doing in my more finished art pieces, where I'll have a square of color behind the character and some parts of the character overlap. But as for the tape, we're going to burn that bridge when we get to it. What I'm doing for the colors is I'm just doing a base layer of marker that I'm going to work on top of with colored pencils. And I already kind of regretted the base layer because this paper already has a little bit of a tone to it. So this kind of made it kind of enhanced that in a way that made the coloring a little bit more difficult. I'm kind of wondering if the marker didn't just take a little bit of the tooth out of the paper, make it more smooth, which would make it much more difficult to use colored pencils on top of. I am kind of out of practice with colored pencils. I used to color everything with colored pencils, but lately I've found that they're kind of too tedious to use. But I do want to get back into them, and I do like to layer them on top of markers and watercolor, so there is already a flat layer of color underneath. My pencils looked a little streaky, which is an issue that I've had in the past and taken great pains to avoid or blend out. And I did in some places try to embrace that and do some cross-hatchy textures. I don't know, man. Sometimes I feel like I'm not really improving as an artist. But looking at that picture of Yami on the opposing page is reminding me of this drawing I did back at 10 years old. Though honestly, the older this drawing gets, the more joy it brings me. It's all the little things. The 37 lines it took me to draw the outline of the cape, the lack of feet, the hammer of flesh that is Yami's hand, the fact that I was more willing to draw chain links than fingers. Well, I'm pleased to say that I can draw fingers pretty well now, and sometimes I even draw the correct amount. I went back in with a few black pens to make the line art stand out again, hoping that would help a bit. This is a technique from the days when I used colored pencil all the time. I found that my line art would kind of get muted after coloring, so I'd go back over it after coloring, add a little more variation to the line weight. Actually, when I ink after sketching, usually I'll just do a really simple job on my first inking, then I'll erase my pencil marks, and then I'll actually go back in with more inking since the eraser can sometimes mute your lines also. Also, I hate that it's so hard to see here, but I added some little marks and cuts to his armor, like on the helmet, with both a black and white pen. With the background, I was trying to match the background of the actual Celtic Guardian card. This was also with the mixed media gel sticks, and I like this background a lot better than the one I made for Dark Magician Girl. And it's around here in which the agony will begin, because you see the washi tape was supposed to create a nice crisp border for the gel sticks when I do my painting. And then once it has dried, I will peel the washi tape off in a nice, satisfying fashion. And it will come off crisply and cleanly, and everything will be wonderful. And I think I'm just going to show that footage with no commentary, no sound. The background sound will just be you groaning in agony as you watch what unfolds. Well, that was painful, but the final result is pretty cool. I'm actually pretty happy with how this turned out. Here is a close-up of all the details, and thankfully the only real rip was by his boot, a bit by his helmet. It looked like the cape was gonna rip, but that was just a spot where I cut in a little bit too deep with the X-Acto knife, so that spot was a little bit loose already. But on that note, I'm going to wrap up the episode right here. There's going to be a tiny bit of a spoiler for the next part, just a little peek at something that I am moving into part 2. So please leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Comment how you like to ruin coloring books. And I'll see you in the next episode.